When you think of March Madness Cinderellas, you probably remember Butler. Loyola Chicago, well, that's because they added a 100-year-old woman to market their program, and most recently, Florida Atlantic. But you're not thinking of Wichita State, and their story technically ended in a fraud. We'll get into that later. I'm gonna be honest, when I was a little boy, about 10 years old in 2013, the first thing that came to my head during this run was, where the hell is Wichita? And the second thing, man, that's about the coolest mascot I've ever seen. This is our Cinderella team for the year. All right, let's do it. Let's get into it. Y'all, if you're new to this channel, subscribe right now because you must not know about me in the month of March. I'm an absolute animal with these college basketball videos. We have a lot more coming, so make sure you don't miss out. Yet, unlike other Cinderella stories I mentioned, the Wichita State Shockers 2013 Final Four run seems to have faded from public memory. But why? It had some of the elements to be unforgettable. It was an overlooked mid-major and a team full of gritty guys. So in this video, I'm bringing the early 2010s college hoops nostalgia. Plus, I have all of the answers to the question of why, and some of them might be hard to take. You're welcome that this video popped up on your recommended. Before the 2012-2013 season, Wichita State wasn't a national name. They had a Final Four appearance in 1965, but that says enough in itself. Next, unlike today where they play in a highly competitive conference, they played in the Missouri Valley Conference, the MVC, which did have Creighton, I'll give it that, but in the grand scheme of things, they were overlooked in favor of other bigger programs. But things were moving in the right direction. Greg Marshall took over as head coach in 2007, and under Marshall, the Shockers became a team to be reckoned with within the mid-major ranks. The only thing missing was the deep run to put them on the map for your average Joe. You could tell they were building something special. In 2011, they won the NIT championship, which is usually a good sign of what's to come. The following year, they won the MVC regular season title and earned a number 5 seed in the tournament. But I thought you said they were disrespected. How did they get a 5 seed? Well, their record was 27-6. Come on now. After all that work in the regular season, they were upset in the first round by VCU. And as you know, VCU went on a crazy run that year themselves. Anyways, that loss lit a fire in the eyes of Greg Marshall, and he basically said, I'm gonna get my lick back. The 2013 Wichita State team wasn't even the best in their own conference. They were 25-7 in the regular season, but lost in the MVC championship to Creighton, meaning they weren't even automatic qualifiers for the tourney. They entered the dance as a 9 seed, meaning almost no one expected them to survive the first weekend because, as we know, you must face the 1 seed in the round of 32. Unlike most Cinderella teams that feature a star, think of Steph Curry with Davidson in 2008, Wichita State was built the other way around. They were built around each other, not just one guy. Defense and toughness. Here's some players to know. Clay Anthony Early. This guy was a star and an absolute hidden gem. He was a junior who spent his first 2 years of eligibility in JUCO, and he popped up and led the team in scoring with nearly 14 a night. And look how many pro teams he played for. But again, this adds on to the storyline. This team's star was never an NBA prodigy, probably another reason why they were not as memorable as other Cinderellas. Next, freshman Ron Baker. This guy has a great story. He was a local boy from the state of Kansas, an unranked recruit, and walked on to Wichita State in 2011, redshirted, battled through injury in the 2013 regular season, and came up clutch in the tournament when they needed him most. The backup point guard, Fred VanVleet, the only name you probably recognize, and one of the most highly touted players on this team as far as recruiting goes. He was only a freshman and played limited minutes throughout the regular season, but once the Shockers got to the big stage, VanVleet made it clear he had the potential to play at the next level, even while being so young. There's one more person I want to mention. It's the heartbeat of the team, starting point guard Malcolm Armstead. He played at Oregon in 2010 and 2011, sat out a year because of the old transfer rule before arriving in Wichita, and the veteran was able to bring it on both sides of the ball. He could lock down your favorite guard and drop a cool 15 and 7 assists. So all right, you get the context. Let me take you through the Cinderella run. Round of 64, number 9 Wichita State versus number 8 Pitt. Now 8 versus 9 games are usually a complete toss-up. I never know which team to go with in my bracket. They're competitive contests, fun to watch, but not this one. Pitt wasn't a slouch either. They went 24-9 on the year with a win over top 5 Syracuse, but the Shockers handled them. It was a close game at half. Wichita State led by 5, but their defense was so stifling, they cruised to the win. Pitt shot 1 of 17 from 3. 73. Enough said. You got the clamps put on you. Shockers 73, Panthers 55. Immediately, they showed they were better than their 9 seed suggested. Round of 32 against number 1 Gonzaga. Now, you have to understand this. People were skeptical about this Zags team. Although they went 32-2 overall, they criticized their non-conference schedule and obviously their West Coast Conference slate. But all of that aside, they were still a number 1 seed, and Wichita State was going to have to put up the fight of their lives to win, and they did. The Shockers were down by a couple of possessions with 6 minutes left to go in the game until they hit 5 consecutive tray balls of their 14 on the night to win 76-70. Just unbelievable. Sweet 16 versus number 13 LaSalle. Now, you can nitpick and say the Shockers got a lucky draw for this one. LaSalle was a crazy story themselves, beating number 4 Kansas State in the round of 64 and 12-seeded Ole Miss in the next. Both were one-possession games, but their Cinderella story ran out of gas like it usually does for these type of teams. Wichita State dominated from start to finish, led by Malcolm Armstead's 18-6-4, 72-58 Shockers. Good night. The Elite 8 matchup with number 2 Ohio State. You could say that this was their toughest battle yet. Ohio State had a fantastic season. They were 29-7, heating up at the right time too as winners of 11 straight games, but none of that mattered. The Shockers at one point led by 20 in the second half. Game over. Psych, y'all. It didn't last long. LaQuinton Ross for Ohio State put up 15 in the second half to get his team back into the game, but Fred VanVleet came off the bench to play some crucial minutes, scoring 12 points that really made a difference, and the Shockers held off the comeback, winning 70-66. The Final Four against Louisville. Wichita State now had to play their second number 1 seed of the tournament, but this time there was no argument for how good the team was. The Cardinals were the unquestioned number 1 overall seed in the tournament. They were led by head coach Rick Pitino, and this is the era when their basketball program was huge for years. Everyone felt like it was their tournament to win, and the Shockers had no business being on the same court as them, but that idea was completely wrong. It was a battle from the tip. The Shockers led by 1 at half and 12 with 13:35 left in the game. Clay Anthony early put up a fathomable effort, scoring 24 with 10 boards, but ultimately Wichita could not stop the bench scoring of Louisville, and they were unable to fend off the late run like they did against Ohio State. The Shockers went cold from the field in the last 5 minutes. The Cardinals went on a run, and the Cinderella was over, 72-68 Louisville. However, as Lee Corso would say, not so fast. In hindsight, this game looks crazy. Remember when I said at the beginning of the video about the run ending in a fraud? Technically, this is true. Come to find out years later, due to violations, Louisville was stripped of their wins from 2010 to 2014, including their national title they went to take after beating Wichita in the next game. This means technically, the Shockers never lost, and you can't really say that about any other Cinderella team. All right, let's get to the deep question. Why don't we remember this run as much as others? I have 5 reasons. First, it didn't end in a championship appearance. Butler in 2010 and UConn in 2014 both played in the national championship game. Wichita State lost in the Final Four, so the lore wasn't quite as crazy. The cupcake draw. Now, beating a 1 and 2 seed on the way to the Final Four is no easy task, but remember what I said about Gonzaga earlier. Many people saw them as a weak 1, and Ohio State, they were very good back then, but it wasn't quite the same as beating a power or a blue blood like Kentucky. So overall, the wins aren't as memorable as they were on paper. Their opponent's story overshadowed them. Louisville won the championship, and with their title being vacated, that's the first thing people remember or want to talk about for 2013. Plus, if you're thinking about a crazy run from that year, most go to 15-seeded Florida Gulf Coast or Dunk City, going to the Sweet 16. Wichita State is not even the top of mind. Moving on, no signature star. Butler had Brad Stevens and Gordon Hayward. Loyola Chicago had Sister Jean, who was a media sensation. Wichita State, just a bunch of unselfish guys. Yes, VanVleet went on to do big things in the NBA, such as winning a title with the Raptors, but he wasn't a star on the 2013 squad, which in my opinion makes the story cooler, not having one standout hooper, but not great for memory purposes. And finally, the saddest but realest point of them all. The Shockers' success was not sustained. In 2014, they went 35-0 and were a number 1 seed. This was the peak of their program, but it all came crashing down with with a loss in the round of 32, which felt like it killed most of the credibility for this team and played into the narrative that mid-major schools shouldn't be rewarded for playing an easy schedule. In 2017, they did a similar thing. Amazing record, second round exit. This was the team with Landry Shamet. 3 years later, after a move into the AAC, things flamed out with the guy who brought the program success, Coach Greg Marshall. He resigned due to a scandal regarding verbal and physical abuse that went back for years, and this was another big hit to the entire Wichita State basketball program that they've still never recovered from. The Shockers have struggled in the 2020s, completely dropping off the radar of great mid-major schools. The reason why we don't think of Wichita State is because they completely faded. They are a shell of what they used to be, and we must come to terms with that.